love about running?
Energy!
It can be uplifting. That human connection that we create on the broadcast every night is incredibly important.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about
The White House has been criticized for not being more forthcoming.
I was surprised to learn that there were any government records taken to the Penn Biden Center. I had no knowledge of it at the time.
Embattled Republican Congressman George Santos has been assigned to 2 House committees.
McCarthy says he cares about voter fraud. Well, how about the fraud perpetrated on the 700,000 plus people who live in this district?
This comes amid a looming debt ceiling crisis that threatens to upend the U.S. economy.
You cannot compromise the full faith and credit of the United States of America.
The American people are desperate for someone who's not talking politics.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Thank you for joining us. The Penn Biden Center is now responding to a letter from Republican House Oversight Chairman James Comer demanding information related to the classified documents found there and first reported by CBS News last week. A University of Pennsylvania spokesman said the think tank has never solicited or received foreign donations. The chair of the panel, Kentucky Republican James Comer, had requested more information related to foreign interactions with the Penn Biden Center. He has also asked for visitor logs at the center. And today, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had this to say about the controversy.
Anything that you want to ask of us about this legal matter, I would refer you to the White House Counsel office. I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to go into further.
For more on this, 2 busy reporters, Weijia Jiang and Scott McFarland, join us now. Weijia is a CBS News senior White House correspondent, and Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it on a busy day. Weijia, any news from the White House about where this all goes from here?
It's great to see you both. And I actually just stepped out of that briefing a short time ago. And the short answer is no, Robert. In fact, the strategy for dealing with the fallout is becoming increasingly clear, at least from the point of view from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who is now deflecting all questions and referring all questions to the Department of Justice and the Office of the White House Counsel, even if the questions do not have to do with the investigation. As an example, today I asked how the discovery of these documents may have prompted a review of how staffers handle classified information and how they are ultimately turned over to National Archives during the transition. I asked if President Biden is satisfied with the current SOP. I asked, whether there would be any changes to prevent this from happening in the future. Even those questions, she referred us to the Department of Justice. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear also the frustration as people are trying to get some clarity because they really haven't answered some of the underlying facts about what has happened here. And so, this is obviously going to continue. The special counsel's investigation has not even kicked off in earnest. And so if this is the strategy, we'll see how long it can last.
Scott, questions continue to mount from House Republicans. What's your reporting, your latest read on the new chairman of the Oversight Committee and where he wants to take his investigation?
This whole documents controversy is an enormous Thanksgiving pie, and many different committees in Congress want a piece of that pie and want a slice of it and want a rather large slice of it. The House Oversight Committee had made clear it was going to be the lead committee investigating Hunter Biden and the Biden family. They now will try to take lead on this documents issue, but there may be some competition from the House Armed Services Committee, which is concerned that some military secrets or information have been exposed. And with the House Intelligence Committee, which is quite certain it has an interest in this because some intelligence secrets might have been exposed. They're both going to want a piece of this. And certainly some of the other frontline House members who crave the attention of the spotlight will seek to have their voices heard on this. That could include the House Judiciary Committee. So you're looking at a classic Washington turf war. This is just what a new Congress has not quite settled out, where the lines of demarcation are.
Ouija, inside the White House, what is it like? They have an agenda on policy, the State of the Union coming up next month, but now they are facing a barrage of questions on this front. How has that affected the mindset of those you talk to inside the West Wing as they approach the rest of this year?
Well, White House officials insist that American people don't care about the discovery of these documents nearly as much as they care about inflation, about prices coming down, about the things that this administration has put into place to try to help people pay their bills. And so, they say that they are just charging forward, almost like there's nothing to see here. And so we don't know yet if that's true. We don't know the political ramifications of all of this because there are still so many unanswered questions. For example, what's in those documents and who took them out of the grounds here and what the intention was. So because the special counsel investigation is far from being wrapped up, at least we don't know of any timeline, it's too early, in my opinion, to say whether the American public cares or not. But that certainly is what sources here at the White House are saying. So they are just trying to turn the page. And that's why you see so much focus on the president's agenda, on his travel. He's going to California tomorrow to look at the damage from all that coastal flooding. He's still taking calls, having meetings, going on trips with foreign leaders. And so I think they're just trying to move along as they normally would. But at some point, as you mentioned, these questions that continue to mount, have to be answered.
And one other question, Scott, in Washington is the looming debt limit deadline. Earlier today, I spoke with Congressman James Clyburn. He predicted it might take Democrats working with a group of Republicans to get a clean debt limit extension at some point. What's your reporting on where the debt limit now stands?
Not sure where the votes come from if they're not coming from Democrats to get this past the finish line in the U.S. House. Again, 4 or 5 votes defecting can kill anything in this House Republican majority. And there are more than 4 or 5 House Republicans, some of whom were part of that group that blocked Kevin McCarthy from the speakership at first, who've been unequivocal that they don't support raising the debt ceiling unless there are concessions made. And you have a White House that says there will be no negotiating and that there should be no negotiating. So the trajectory of avoiding a default and a disaster seems to go through some unique, new coalition of Republican and Democratic votes in the U.S. House. The challenge there is that the last time this came up, when it was Democrats' responsibility to raise the debt ceiling in the House, they got a sum total of 0 Republican votes. So how enthusiastic are they going to be about sharing their votes when it's the turn of the Republicans? But one other thing jumps out at me as I listen to what Ouija says and read some of your reporting, is that nobody's on message right now. The Biden administration comes out of the holidays, starting a new year, and they're being peppered with questions about documents. The House Republicans take over. They have a whole slew of message bills they want to pass on abortion, on the radicalization of the federal administration. And instead, they're talking about George Santos and recovering from an unprecedented House Speaker near disaster.
And which committees has Santos landed on?
The House Small Business Committee and the House Science, Space, and Technology Committees, which I had to remember the names of because they're so low ranking.
What about
they're so low priority.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene and Congressman Paul Gosar, 2 controversial House Republicans? Where have they landed on committees?
There's Marjorie Taylor Greene on the House Oversight Committee, which has this almost limitless portfolio. Its breadth is the entirety of the federal government. It's a uniquely effective place for somebody who likes to make a lot of noise and likes to question what the government's doing. Not a big legislating committee. She may not be a pivotal legislator, but she certainly can be a critic and an investigator on that panel.
That oversight panel will be in the spotlight with Chairman Comer and others on that committee leading the charge for House Republicans. Ouija Jiang and Scott McFarland, thank you so much. Embattled New York Congressman George Santos is, as we discussed, facing new accusations that he allegedly stole money from a disabled veteran who was trying to get potentially life-saving surgery for his service dog. Santos faces multiple criminal investigations after reports surfaced that he fabricated much of his resume during his congressional campaign. And a former roommate of Santos had this to say about the congressman.
George Santos is whoever you want him to be, at whatever time you want him to be. Just that simple. He is a chameleon that will change color, shape, political ideation, thought to be whoever he thinks you want him to be.
Multiple state and local Republican leaders, as well as several Democratic lawmakers, have called on Santos to resign. And as President Biden deals with this documents issue, his political allies are reacting and waiting for him to announce his re-election bid. CBS spoke to one such ally, Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina, and we'll bring you that conversation next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Not one more child!
School shootings have parents fighting mad.
I promised my daughter I was going to fight. It's going to keep on happening.
And teachers taking lessons in how to fight back.
This is an exercise.
We approach it as it's you or them.
It shouldn't have to be your teacher's job to protect your life.
But will the battle over gun control,
people are afraid that they're going to lose their gun rights altogether,
be the hardest lesson of all?
The exercise, you're having to shoot at an adult. Are you prepared to have to kill one of your students?
Guns in the Classroom, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. The White House is continuing with scheduled events as President Biden faces investigations over classified documents found at his former office and his residence. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are privately wondering about how these issues might affect his potential re-election campaign in 2024, if at all. Earlier today, CBS spoke with South Carolina Democratic Congressman James Clyburn, a House Democratic leader. Here's part of our conversation. Congressman Clyburn, one issue that's dominating Washington this week is President Biden's handling of records marked as classified, found at his home, found at the Penn Biden Center. What is your assessment of his handling of this matter so far?
Well, I think all of us are quite aware that the president has expressed some frustration with the way this is going. All of us are. The fact of the matter is, all of this came about as a result of someone moving the documents or boxes from his old office and running across this information, which was immediately turned over. Now, the problem with all of that is you keep moving, you keep going through boxes, and all of a sudden, a second page crops up, and you go someplace else, and a third page crops up. It would be much better for all of this to just come out at one time, but this is frustrating to him, and it is to a lot of us. But when you look at things like this, you have to take into account intent. What is the intent? No one sees anything like the president intentionally taking documents into his private residence or private office. And so the investigations will go forward, and we'll see what the results are.
Has President Biden spoken to you personally about this issue?
No, he has not. I have not talked to the president in the last couple of weeks. I don't think. I think I may have spoken to him a couple of weeks ago, but we have not talked about this.
In terms of what's next on this front, what do you believe the president and the White House should do?
Exactly what he's doing. Let the Justice Department do its work, stay out of the way, and if any other documents are discovered, do what he's done before, immediately turn them over. And so I think that most people, if you want to be fair about all of this, can understand how these things happen. I just move out of my whip office. I have no idea what's in those boxes because whatever's in those boxes, I didn't put it there. And so we'll just have to wait to see what I may discover when I go through the boxes.
Former President Trump is going to head to your state later this month. Former President Trump, as he continues in his 2024 presidential run. I also heard recently that you said you were surprised that Democrats are moving to have their first primary be in your state, the Palmetto State, South Carolina. Congressman, frankly, I was surprised to hear you were surprised because nothing happens in South Carolina Democratic politics unless it goes through Congressman Clyburn. So let's be real here. You had some influence in pulling this primary to the front of the line.
Absolutely not. That is absolutely not true. I did not have anything to do with this being in the front of the line. I'm an old politician, let's just say, and I mean that in both chronologically as well as length in service. And I do believe that things were working well with South Carolina being the fourth and first in the South. I have always advocated for South Carolina to be the first in the South. I have never advocated for South Carolina to be first in the nation. So when I got the call saying that the president was going to make this recommendation, it was a surprise to me.
What about President Biden? When do you believe he will formally announce his 2024 campaign?
I don't know. I hope he will announce to do so. I will leave it up to him as to what the timing ought to be. But I'm all in for President Biden. I think he's demonstrated in these 2 years, soon to be 2 years, that he is deserving of re-election. And I do believe he will be re-elected, irrespective of who the Republicans may put up.
Are you convinced that President Biden is going to run?
Yes, I am.
So how will the rest of the Democratic leadership handle the Biden's documents story? We'll get into that when we come back. You're streaming Red and Blue.
original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women.
What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. CBS News political contributor Ashley Etienne joins us now to discuss our conversation with Congressman James Clyburn, the Assistant House Democratic leader. Ashley, you have so much experience in Democratic politics. You've worked at the highest levels of the House of Representatives. You've worked for Vice President Kamala Harris. You heard from Congressman Clyburn a lot of support for President Biden when it comes to this document story. Is that your sense of where the Democratic Party is right now as they react to this still unfolding story?
No, I think Mr. Clyburn was right. There's a lot of frustration about how the entire story rolled out. It was somewhat of a disaster, in fact, from a communications perspective. But, you know, here's the point, and he made a really good point. It's all about intent. That's what it comes down to. And so let's compare the facts. You have President Trump, who took hundreds of documents from the White House, obstructed the DOJ's efforts to try to retrieve those documents. You know, the FBI had to, forcefully come and take those documents, compared to President Biden, who discovered the documents, handed them over, and is cooperating with DOJ. I mean, so what the GOP is trying to do is provide this, make this false equivalence here that doesn't really exist. But what I really noticed about it, having worked on the House side and the Oversight Committee, what I would sort of caution Chairman Comer about is it feels like he's going down the same path that Republicans typically do, the path that Issa took, Dan Burton took, and even
Former
Ken Starr took.
Committee oversight chairmen in the House,
and even Ken Starr took, right? Which is he's going down what's a fishing expedition, right? He's trying to sort of draw this link between the Penn Biden Center and communist China, which is quite ridiculous. In fact, what I think my advice to him would be is just to really focus on what every scandal boils down to, which is the cover-up. Right? If the timeline is true, that was, first sort of broken by CBS News, if the timeline is true, it's a problem for President Biden. They should really ask the question really simply, who knew what when, and who made the order to DOJ not to make it public that these documents had come in? I mean, they sat on the documents for months until CBS, broke the news. So to me, that's the cleaner narrative. Trying to go on this fishing expedition and this witch hunt to draw some link between Biden and China is ridiculous when the reality is the timeline is problematic enough. If they ask for the documents, the White House says no, then you've got a clean narrative. They're hiding something, they've got something to hide. And that's really enough when it comes down to these types of investigations.
What about Congressman Clyburn's comments about President Biden and the 2024 race? He said he is convinced, yes, I am, he said, he is convinced that Biden runs in 2024. Are you and other Democrats as convinced as Clyburn?
Listen, I'm not just convinced, I'm excited about it. I think the president, as I've said before, is by far the most consequential president in recent history in terms of his accomplishments, in terms of bipartisan accomplishments on everything from the Inflation Reduction Act to the CHIPS Act. I mean, it's really profound and incredible what he's been able to accomplish. So I really hope the president does decide to run. I think the party itself is confident that he will. Nobody wants to see this, the party mired in a primary fight. Like, it could be incredibly messy and really take us off track and off course and erase all the good work that he's already done. So I think everyone's excited about it, anticipating that he will run again, of course.
Clyburn warned any Democrat about mounting a primary challenge. Last night, I was covering Senator Bernie Sanders give a big speech about the state of the working class. He is making no move to run against President Biden. In fact, he's worked closely with President Biden. A Sanders ally, Congressman Ro Khanna of California, who was co-chair of Bernie's campaign in 2020, he's not making a move to primary Biden. He says Biden should not face any challenge. Do you sense, though, because of the document story or President Biden's age or any other issue, that there is going to be a primary challenge?
No, I think the document story is much ado about nothing, especially when it comes to Biden. Trump, I think there's a clear case of intent, and DOJ is going to aggressively pursue that. But I think the document story doesn't play a big factor in whether or not people decide to run against.
What about the issue of generational change? Could that prompt somebody maybe lesser known to jump into the race, or you just don't see it at this point?
I don't see it at this point. I don't see why anyone would. I mean, what's your argument against President Biden? If you're challenging him, on what grounds would you challenge him? That on his age? I mean, I've worked for, I've worked for an 82-year-old before, and they're, and I've worked for the president as well, and they're incredibly sharp and on top of it. And what would your argument be to run against him?
What are you hearing about the announcement timeline? The State of the Union coming up in early February, sometime soon after that, or could he wait months?
Well, the White House is super tight-lipped. They're very insular.
That's why I was asking you.
I got friends over there, but, you always, once you leave, you always question those friendships and how deep they actually are.
I'll leave that alone.
But nevertheless, no, I anticipate that it'll be soon after, because you guys will start to wear him out on the questions, right? Whether or not he's going to run. And, you don't want too much of a swirl. You want to get ahead of that, right? And you want to control the story as much as you possibly can. So I anticipate it'll be soon after the State of the Union. And the State of the Union provides him an incredible opportunity to really lay out again for the American people what he's done over the past 2 years that has really, not only brought our country back from the brink, but also improved their lives.
Gonna have to leave it there. Thank you so much to Ashley Etienne, top Democratic strategist, for joining us. And a group of Michigan Republicans are now urging Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to run for president. At least 18 Michigan Republican lawmakers signed a letter asking DeSantis to mount a 2024 bid. The State House floor leader hand-delivered it to the Florida governor in December. But while DeSantis is getting a push to run, he is also facing pressure on his stance on abortion from some other potential 2024 contenders. CBS News asked South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem about it on Tuesday. Does Governor DeSantis' support for a 15-week ban as the Florida law, does that not go far enough in your view?
Bob, I've always proudly been pro-life, and our law today in South Dakota allows an exception to save the life of a mother. But beyond that, it is illegal to get an abortion in South Dakota today. I was raised by a dad that said, we don't complain about things, we fix them. A lot of people talk and say a lot of things to grab headlines and make broad statements. I prefer to take action.
You can see more of my interviews with Governor Kristi Noem and Congressman Clyburn at cbsnews.com. And that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.